Audie Leon Murphy was born on June 20th, 1925, near the small farming settlement of Kingston, Hunt County, Texas. His family operated as sharecroppers. Income was unstable. Food depended on seasonal yields and whatever could be taken from the land. Murphy left school after the 5th grade. He worked in cotton fields for approximately $1 per day. Hunting supplemented the family's diet. This forced him to learn accurate rifle fire at short ranges, typically between 30 and 70 meters, where a missed shot meant losing a meal. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Murphy attempted to enlist. He was rejected by the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps for being underweight and underage. His sister later signed an affidavit adjusting his birth year. With this document, Murphy was accepted into the United States Army on June 30th, 1942. His first training base was Camp Walters, Texas. There he received the M1 Garand rifle, completed infantry drills, bayonet training, grenade handling, and forced marches. He qualified as marksman and later as expert. He then moved to Fort Meade, Maryland. Training intensified. Squad tactics, night navigation, work with Browning M1919 machine guns, and 60mm mortars. These bases formed the fundamental skill set he would later apply in actual combat. Murphy deployed overseas on February 20th, 1943. His assignment was Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. This regiment became his operational base for the next 2 years, moving through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, southern France, and the Colmar region. His first major combat zone was Sicily. On July 10, 1943, the division landed near Licata. Murphy served as a runner, carrying messages under fire. During a patrol near Canicattì, he engaged 2 Italian officers at a distance of approximately 90 meters, killing both. These were among his first recorded enemy casualties. In January 1944, Murphy participated in the Anzio landings. The front solidified into a static line of trenches, dugouts, and artillery exchanges. German forces operated from fortified villages and ridge positions surrounding the beachhead. American positions consisted of shallow trenches and dispersed firing points supported by field artillery. Murphy conducted night patrols and forward observation tasks. He advanced to within 50 to 70 meters of enemy positions to direct artillery fire and used rifle grenades against German vehicles. For these actions, he received the Bronze Star with V device. Casualties increased across the front. Several close friends were killed by mortar fire or artillery. In one documented incident, a German 105mm shell detonated within 15 meters of an American trench, killing multiple members of Murphy's platoon. He survived and remained on duty. On August 15, 1944, the 3rd Division executed the Dragoon landings in southern France. Company B landed near Ramatuelle. The approach to inland objectives required movement through vineyards, where rows of grapevines created narrow corridors. A German MG-42 opened fire from elevated ground at an estimated range of 200 to 300 meters. The fire pinned down the platoon. Murphy maneuvered forward using low ground and recovered a Browning machine gun abandoned by another element. From approximately 70 to 80 meters, he suppressed the German position, killing several enemy soldiers and allowing the unit to advance. Shortly after, he approached a stone house located roughly 100 yards from his line. 2 German soldiers exited the building with raised hands. When an American soldier moved forward to accept their surrender, the Germans opened fire and killed him. Murphy assaulted the structure alone. He used grenades and rifle fire to kill 6 Germans, wound 2, and capture 11. For this action, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Through August and September, German defensive positions shifted north toward Montelimar. Company B engaged in multiple skirmishes. The regiment received a Presidential Unit Citation for its operations in this sector. In October 1944, near the Lomec Quarry and the approaches to Clary, Murphy carried out additional forward actions. In one case, he advanced to a range of approximately 200 meters to locate a German machine gun position. He closed the distance to roughly 100 meters, used terrain folds for cover, and eliminated the crew. Later that week, he directed artillery fire for over an hour from a position roughly 200 meters from German lines. These operations earned him 2 Silver Stars. During the same period, he was hit by a sniper. The shot struck his leg. Despite the wound, he identified the firing point and killed the sniper with a single aimed shot. He received another Purple Heart and returned to service once medically cleared. By late 1944, casualty rates among officers were high. Murphy, then a staff sergeant, was battlefield promoted to second lieutenant and assigned command of Company B. His responsibilities now included control of defensive lines, coordination with supporting artillery, and maintaining unit cohesion under fire. In early January 1945, the strategic focus shifted to eastern France. German forces maintained a significant stronghold known as the Colmar Pocket. The enemy's primary bases included the fortified city of Colmar and the Rhine River crossings at Breisach and Chalampé. These positions supplied infantry units, armored formations, artillery batteries, and assault gun detachments, operating around the villages of Riedveer, Golzvir, and Jebsheim. The American base of operations consisted of wooded terrain north of Riedveer, an area informally referred to as the Riedveer Woods. Artillery positions were established farther west, behind frozen canals and secondary roads. The 15th Infantry Regiment advanced through snow-covered fields and forest edges under regular German mortar and machine gun fire. Movement was slow due to mud, ice, and reduced visibility. On January 24th and 25th, the regiment engaged German forces in and around Riedveer. Several platoons suffered ammunition shortages. Company B, now under Murphy's command, received orders to hold the northern tree line outside Golzvir. The ground in this sector offered limited cover. Trenches were shallow because the soil was frozen. Supporting weapons included Browning M1919 machine guns, BR automatic rifles, 60mm mortars, and a single M10 tank destroyer positioned near the company command post. The M10 carried a 76mm gun and a 50 caliber Browning machine gun on its turret roof. If you want to see Audie Murphy prove himself against German artillery, click like. This will help us share other forgotten stories like this one. And please subscribe. During the night, German mortars probed the American line. Artillery fire struck the tree line at irregular intervals. By the morning of January 26th, the enemy had concentrated elements of infantry and armored units east of Golzvir. Intelligence reports estimated up to 250 German soldiers, supported by 6 tanks or assault guns. Their objective was to break through the American tree line, bypass the woods, and force a withdrawal of the 15th Infantry Regiment's forward elements. Company B's task was simple: hold the line. Murphy understood that his understrength unit would not withstand a massed armored assault for long. The regiment depended on this isolated sector to prevent a German breakout from their base at Golzvir into the open ground behind the American line. The next phase of the battle would expose how far one officer was willing to go to delay an entire enemy formation. On the morning of January 26, 1945, the terrain around Golzvir lay under deep snow. Fields were open. Visibility varied between 200 and 400 meters depending on drifting smoke and fog. The tree line north of the village marked the forward edge of Company B's position. Murphy operated from a shallow command post located near the M10 tank destroyer, assigned to support the company. German forces initiated the attack with concentrated mortar and artillery fire. Rounds impacted the tree line at irregular intervals. Several American foxholes collapsed under direct hits. Casualties occurred immediately. The bombardment lasted long enough to disorganize the forward squads, forcing them to reposition deeper into the woods. Once the shelling lifted, German infantry emerged from the eastern edge of Golzvir. The first wave consisted of approximately 1 reinforced company. Behind them moved 6 armored vehicles, tanks or assault guns, likely operating in 2 sections. Their movement followed the main road and the adjacent open field, allowing them to deploy with overlapping fields of fire. Company B engaged the infantry with Browning M1919 machine guns, bars, and rifle fire. Initial American positions were roughly 150 to 200 meters from the advancing German line. The enemy used the uneven ground and snowdrifts to reduce exposure. The armored vehicles advanced slowly, halting to fire high-explosive shells at the tree line. Within minutes, the M10 tank destroyer became a primary target. German armor fired several rounds at it. One shot struck the vehicle, igniting fuel or onboard ammunition. The crew abandoned the M10 under fire and retreated into the woods. Flames rose from the engine compartment, turning the destroyer into a burning silhouette visible across the field. Murphy assessed the situation. Company B could not sustain a prolonged fight. Ammunition supplies were low. Casualties increased. German infantry had reached a point where their small arms fire could penetrate the shallow American line. A breakthrough here would expose the entire regimental flank. He ordered his men to withdraw into the woods and establish a secondary defensive line. He remained at the front to direct artillery fire using the field telephone connected to supporting 105mm batteries. He provided accurate adjustments as German infantry regrouped for a final push. Artillery shells impacted across the field, stalling the advance but not stopping it. The enemy continued closing the distance. As German forces reached approximately 100 meters from the burning M10, Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer. Despite flames and the threat of ammunition detonation, he positioned himself behind the .50 caliber Browning machine gun mounted on the turret roof. From this elevated point, he had a wide arc of fire across the open field. He opened fire at once. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the snow, striking German infantry attempting to outflank the position. Murphy used controlled bursts to conserve ammunition. He engaged targets at distances between 30 and 300 meters. Enemy soldiers attempting to reach cover were cut down before closing in. Those advancing behind the armored vehicles were forced to separate and seek improvised shelters in shallow depressions. German armor shifted fire toward the M10. High explosive shells impacted around the vehicle, throwing snow and debris in wide arcs. Machine gun rounds struck the turret and hull. Murphy continued firing, adjusting his aim with each shift of the enemy line. He reported enemy movements to the artillery batteries, guiding fire onto advancing formations. Shells landed among the second and third waves of infantry, creating confusion and halting coordinated attack patterns. The German assault stalled approximately 50 meters short of the tree line. Infantrymen attempting to withdraw were hit by both artillery impacts and Murphy's direct fire. Armored vehicles faced difficulty advancing across the snow under artillery pressure. Several enemy soldiers attempted a flanking maneuver through a drainage ditch, but Murphy targeted them at close range, forcing them to fall back. During the engagement, Murphy sustained a wound to his leg. He remained on top of the burning M10 and continued the fight. Empty Haspuelas casings collected around his position. Smoke from the fire mixed with exhaust from the German vehicles, reducing visibility across parts of the field. Murphy fired until the final belt of ammunition was expended. Reports later indicated that the concentrated fire from the .50 caliber machine gun, combined with artillery he directed, inflicted approximately 50 German casualties and disorganized the armored attack. The 6 enemy vehicles were rendered ineffective for further coordinated movement, either disabled, forced back, or trapped without infantry support. When ammunition was exhausted, Murphy climbed down from and moved into the woods. Company B's secondary line was intact. His men were preparing to withstand another attack. Instead, Murphy ordered a counterattack. The German assault force, previously advancing in strength, was now disorganized from artillery strikes and the prolonged delay caused by his stand at the front line. Company B advanced from the tree line in coordinated bounds. American riflemen cleared pockets of resistance left across the field. German units began withdrawing toward Golzvir. The counterattack regained the lost ground and re-established control of the northern approach to the village. The German objective, to break through the American line and disrupt the regimental position, failed. Murphy's actions on the burning tank destroyer became the decisive point of the engagement. Alone at the forward edge of battle, he delayed and disrupted an enemy force of roughly 250 soldiers supported by armored vehicles. His combination of direct fire and precise artillery adjustments prevented a breakthrough and enabled the successful counterattack. This engagement became the reason for his Medal of Honor. It also defined his reputation across the division, a soldier who combined marksmanship, tactical judgment, and complete willingness to remain in exposed positions when the situation required it. When the counterattack at Golzvir concluded, Company B reassembled along the northern tree line. Snow still covered the open field where the German assault had broken apart. The burned tank destroyer remained in place, its hull collapsed inward from internal fire, the metal distorted by heat and incoming rounds. The machine gun mount was blackened, the receiver scorched, and empty brass casings were fused into clusters across the turret roof. These were the physical remnants of the position where Murphy had held off an assault force several times the size of his company. American engineers moved forward to assess the aftermath. They marked areas where 105mm artillery had struck, where German infantry had fallen, and where armored vehicles had halted under fire. Several enemy soldiers lay between 30 and 70 meters from the M10, positions indicating they had nearly reached the final stretch toward the tree line. Others were farther out, between 120 and 180 meters from the American line, in shallow depressions they had attempted to use as firing points or staging areas. Tracks on the snow showed that at least 2 German armored vehicles had reversed course under artillery fire rather than attempt another push. Murphy observed these details while medical personnel treated his leg wound. The shrapnel had entered from the left side, likely from artillery fragments or ricochets during the height of the fight. Blood had frozen along parts of his trousers. Despite this, he refused evacuation past the battalion aid station. He preferred to stay close to Company B, whose manpower had been reduced by casualties taken during the initial bombardment and the sustained small arms fire that followed. Inside the aid station, a converted stone farmhouse located roughly 1.2 kilometers behind the tree line, dozens of wounded soldiers were lined along improvised cots. The interior smelled of iodine, antiseptic, and burned cloth. Medics applied pressure dressings, splints, and morphine where required. Murphy's treatment took only minutes, cleaning the wound, bandaging, and issuing orders for limited activity. The attending officer recommended temporary removal from line duty. Murphy declined. Meanwhile, intelligence officers compiled reports from patrols sent out after the counterattack. German casualties were spread across a broad arc. The assault formation had been larger than initially estimated. Data gathered from captured maps and equipment indicated that several German infantry platoons and assault gun crews had advanced from positions inside Golzvir, supported by mortars placed closer to the village. Distances between their assembly area and the tree line ranged from 250 to 400 meters. Open terrain with minimal cover, chosen because it allowed armored vehicles to maneuver. The M10's location had been critical. Positioned near the company command post, roughly 20 meters behind the forward foxholes, it provided both a psychological anchor and a functional heavy weapon. When the crew abandoned it under fire, the vehicle became a point of vulnerability. Murphy's decision to occupy the machine gun mount transformed it into a strong point. The burning vehicle's height added approximately 2.5 meters of elevation above the ground level, enough to provide superior observation. From this vantage point, he had seen enemy infantry attempt to close the gap from 150 meters to 80 meters, then to 50 meters, before the artillery adjustments forced them to halt. Company B regrouped in the woods. Squad leaders counted ammunition. Most riflemen had fewer than 2 full bandoliers remaining. Bar gunners reported low numbers of loaded magazines. Mortar crews had expended nearly their entire supply. The defensive line had reached the edge of collapse during the heaviest phase of the assault, when artillery phone lines shook under impacts, and German infantry appeared through the drifting smoke only 60 meters from the tree line. The counterattack they launched afterward had been measured and methodical. Fire teams advanced in short bounds, 15 to 20 meters at a time, maintaining fields of fire on the flanks. German resistance weakened quickly. Their surviving soldiers attempted to retreat toward Golzvir, using the same depressions they had advanced through. In several locations, American riflemen found abandoned equipment, helmets, ammunition pouches, even a machine gun bipod left in place atop a snowbank. By nightfall, the field was quiet. Artillery occasionally struck areas deeper in German-held territory, but there were no further probing attacks. Company B established listening posts 40 to 70 meters ahead of the tree line. These positions were manned by 2- or 3-man teams equipped with rifles, hand grenades, and field telephones. Their task was to detect renewed movement or infiltration attempts. Murphy returned to these forward positions briefly. He inspected the ground where the fighting had been most intense. At one spot, 30 meters from the M10, the snow was torn by shells and marked by scattered cartridge cases from German rifles. Another area, roughly 80 meters out, showed a cluster of craters caused by the artillery adjustments he had called in while on the destroyer's roof. The narrowness of that survival margin was evident. Had the German infantry advanced another 20 to 30 meters during one of the pauses between artillery volleys, they would have reached grenade range. By the next morning, American forces secured the immediate area. Company B's remaining strength was assessed. A number of men had been killed during the initial contact. Several had been struck by machine gun fire when German infantry closed within 120 meters. Others died under mortar bombardment before the battle reached its peak. Murphy recorded their names and reported them to battalion headquarters. The loss of experienced riflemen and NCOs would affect operations in the days ahead. His own physical condition remained stable. The wound caused pain during movement, but mobility was largely retained. Medics advised him to avoid extended marches, but the tactical situation required all capable officers. German forces remained entrenched in Golzvir and nearby positions, and further attacks were possible. Company B resumed preparations for renewed operations. Ammunition resupply teams brought forward crates of 30-06 cartridges, mortar rounds, and 50 caliber belts. Engineers cleared paths through the snow to improve movement between platoon positions. The M10's wreckage was marked for later recovery. It would be left in place for several days, its burned frame serving as a reference point for upcoming movements. As Murphy reviewed the positions, Battalion Command contacted him with preliminary commendations. Reports of his stand at the M10 had already passed through the regiment and division headquarters. Officers who inspected the battlefield understood the scale of the action. A single junior officer had delayed a combined arms assault long enough to preserve an entire company and enable a successful counterattack. This internal recognition marked the beginning of the official review process that would eventually result in the Medal of Honor recommendation. On January 27th, the day after the engagement, the 3rd Infantry Division ordered a full battlefield survey of the Golzvir sector. The purpose was to map the German assault routes, determine the effectiveness of American defensive fire, and record positions where significant resistance or casualties occurred. Murphy accompanied the survey team for part of the inspection. The survey began at first light. The temperature remained below freezing and the snow had hardened overnight, preserving footprints, drag marks, crater edges, and the lines left by armored treads. American engineers measured distances with pacing and line markers. They traced the path of the German advance from the eastern edge of Golzvir to the point where infantry units had been halted by artillery and fire. The first concentration of German casualties lay between 170 and 190 meters from the tree line. These soldiers had likely been struck during the initial artillery volleys Murphy called in, while the German formation was still organizing. Farther ahead, between 120 and 150 meters, dozens of rifle cartridge cases indicated positions where German infantry attempted to establish firing lines before closing the distance. These locations aligned with the moments when Murphy, firing from the turret, forced soldiers to abandon cover or break formation. The closest bodies were found at 30 to 50 meters from the tree line. These troops had advanced under the assumption that the American defense was collapsing following the M10's ignition. Snow patterns showed where soldiers had crawled or attempted to sprint. Several fell in nearly identical positions, suggesting that multiple men were killed while attempting to throw grenades or rush the final approach. One set of tracks, likely from a German squad leader, ran in a straight line toward the M10 before stopping abruptly. A burst of 50 caliber fire had cut across his route, scattering ammunition pouches and personal items. The position where he fell was measured at 36 meters from the rear corner of the destroyer's hull. The armored vehicles had approached to within 220 to 260 meters of the American line. Crater depth analysis suggested that at least one vehicle fired multiple high-explosive rounds directly at the M10 and nearby foxholes. Shrapnel from these impacts extended outward in arcs of 15 to 25 meters, explaining several American casualties who had been hit by fragments rather than direct fire. These were the same blasts that had wounded Murphy. As the survey continued, officers documented the state of American defensive positions. Several foxholes were partially collapsed or filled with debris. One destroyed position contained the helmet and gear of a bar gunner, killed in the first minutes of the attack. His weapon had been recovered during the counterattack and returned to the company. The battalion intelligence officer noted that the German attack force was larger than initially understood. Based on equipment, shell casings, and captured documents, the assault probably involved 3 infantry platoons supported by 6 armored vehicles, with additional machine gun teams held in reserve. Their intent was not merely to probe the American line, but to break through it and open a corridor toward the regiment's rear. When the battlefield survey team completed the initial report, it was forwarded to regimental headquarters along with statements from Murphy's platoon leaders and witnesses who had seen him directing artillery and firing from the M10. These documents became the foundation of the Medal of Honor recommendation. The process for recommending the Medal of Honor required detailed evidence. Witness statements needed to be precise and consistent. Officers verified timelines, distances, enemy strength, and the condition of the battlefield. They interviewed soldiers from multiple platoons who had observed the engagement from different angles, riflemen in the tree line, machine gun crews positioned farther back, and medics who saw Murphy returning from the burning vehicle. The report concluded that Murphy's actions directly prevented the collapse of the company's position and stalled the advance of an assault force estimated at up to 250 enemy soldiers with armor support. It emphasized that by remaining alone at the forward edge, exposed to artillery, machine gun fire, and an exploding vehicle, he maintained control of the battle long enough for Company B to withdraw to a defensible position and later counterattack successfully. While the formal review progressed, Company B resumed operational duties. Patrols advanced toward Golzvir to probe for remaining German positions. Skirmishes occurred at short ranges, often between 40 and 100 meters, as German rearguards attempted to delay the American approach. Murphy participated in several of these movements despite his injury, though his activity was restricted by medical orders. During one patrol, a German rifleman armed with a Karabiner 98K opened fire from a stable doorway at a range of roughly 120 meters. The first shot hit the snow between 2 American soldiers. The second passed over Murphy's position. The squad responded with controlled bursts from bars and rifle fire. After the position was silenced, they advanced and found the rifleman dead, his ammunition scattered across the straw-covered floor. These fights were brief and lacked the scale of the previous day's engagement, but they demonstrated the continued danger facing the regiment. German forces still occupied positions in Golzvir and surrounding villages, and the division's advance required systematic clearing of each strongpoint. By January 29th, the 3rd Infantry Division renewed its push eastward. Company B advanced on the flank of a larger regimental movement. Snowfall reduced visibility to 150 meters at intervals, making it difficult to identify enemy firing positions until they revealed themselves. The unit encountered mortar fire originating from the outskirts of Golzvir. Rounds landed between 40 and 80 meters from the lead squads, forcing temporary withdrawal into shallow depressions. As they approached the village, Murphy noted the terrain advantages that had aided the German assault 2 days earlier. The open fields gave armored vehicles freedom of movement, while the gradual slope toward the tree line had made the American defensive line more vulnerable to direct fire. Observing these features reinforced his understanding of how critical the M10 position had been to the company's survival. Regimental headquarters delivered word that Murphy would be recommended for the Medal of Honor. The news circulated through the division quickly. Soldiers who had witnessed the fight described it to anyone who asked. A lone lieutenant standing on a burning tank destroyer, firing until the last belt of ammunition was gone. Some exaggerated details, distance, number of casualties, number of tanks hit, but the core facts matched the reports filed by officers. Murphy accepted the news with little reaction. His focus remained on the immediate tactical requirements, clearing the remaining German pockets, maintaining company cohesion, and preparing for the next phase of operations. The Colmar pocket was collapsing, but further fighting lay ahead. By January 30th, American and French forces pressed deeper into the Colmar pocket. Company B advanced alongside other elements of the 15th Infantry Regiment, maintaining contact with German positions as they pulled back toward the interior of the pocket. Golzvir, although damaged and partially abandoned, remained a tactical concern. German rearguard units continued to fire from concealed positions inside barns, cellars, and rubble. The first contact of the day occurred at a range of 90 to 110 meters when a German machine gun team opened fire from a stone shed on the left side of the village. The initial burst struck the ground between two American riflemen, kicking up snow and dirt. A second burst hit a tree trunk near Murphy, splintering wood across his position. Company B responded with a bar team moving along the right flank, closing to approximately 60 meters before firing sustained bursts into the shed. The German gun fell silent. When the position was checked, both members of the crew were found dead beside their MG-42. As Company B moved through the outskirts, they encountered evidence of the enemy's rapid withdrawal. Abandoned equipment, helmets, entrenching tools, ammunition crates, littered alleyways. Several dead soldiers lay along the main street, most struck by artillery fragments. Murphy recognized that these casualties likely resulted from the supporting fire he had directed while the main assault had been underway 2 days earlier. The company advanced cautiously, using doorways and stone corners for cover. German snipers remained active inside the village. One shot struck the frozen ground directly in front of Murphy, causing the round to ricochet upward and fragment. A shard of stone grazed the side of his face. The sniper fired a second shot, missing by less than a meter. A squad maneuvered through a side passage, closing to 40 meters before engaging the sniper's upper floor window with rifle fire. When they entered the building, they found the shooter dead beside a scoped Mauser rifle. By midday, Company B secured the northern portion of Golzvir. Casualties were moderate. 2 wounded by mortar fragments, 1 killed by machine gun fire, while crossing an exposed section of road. The loss weighed heavily on the platoon, as it came only days after the intense fighting at the tree line. Murphy recorded the fallen soldier's name in his field notebook, a practice he had maintained since Italy. Murphy's leg injury continued to trouble him. The wound stiffened in cold weather, limiting his stride and making long advances difficult. Nevertheless, he insisted on remaining with the forward squads. His presence contributed to unit morale, especially among the younger soldiers who viewed him as the central figure of the recent battle. On January 31st, the regiment pushed eastward. The remaining German strongpoints were located along the approaches to the Ill River. Company B advanced through orchards and partially flooded fields. Some areas required movement along raised dikes. The enemy deployed mortar teams behind the riverbank, firing at ranges of 300 to 500 meters. Shells detonated on the frozen ground, propelling fragments horizontally. During this movement, a mortar round exploded 15 meters to Murphy's right. The blast knocked him off balance, and fragments pierced the coat of a soldier directly behind him. The soldier collapsed, mortally wounded. Murphy and 2 others dragged him behind a low earthen ridge, but his injuries were severe, and he died within minutes. Murphy recorded the event with the same neutral precision he applied to all battlefield losses: time, location, cause. Forward progress continued. German resistance stiffened briefly near a cluster of farm buildings, where they had positioned 2 machine guns covering a narrow lane. The first gun opened fire at 130 meters, pinning the lead squad. The second gun engaged from the flank at 180 meters, forcing the Americans into cover behind a stone wall. A mortar team from Company B deployed and fired 2 rounds. The explosions landed within 10 meters of the second machine gun nest, silencing it. The first position was cleared when a fire team advanced to 25 meters and used grenades to eliminate the crew. By February 1st, German forces had withdrawn deeper toward Colmar. Their defensive structure had fractured under pressure from American and French attacks. Company B established temporary positions along the outskirts of 1vs250 while the regiment reorganized. Murphy received updated information regarding his Medal of Honor recommendation. Command staff had gathered witness accounts, tactical diagrams, and artillery logs matching his reported actions. The documentation emphasized the sustained nature of his stand, roughly an hour of continuous exposure under enemy fire, and the strategic importance of delaying the attack so Company B could avoid encirclement. Despite the attention, Murphy remained detached from the recognition process. He viewed the engagement as a functional necessity rather than an act of heroism. His primary concerns were the company's remaining strength, the need for ammunition resupply, and the physical condition of his men after days of fighting in freezing weather. On February 2nd, the Allied encirclement of Colmar was nearly complete. American troops entered the city from the west, while French armored units advanced from the south. Company B moved on the right flank, encountering minimal resistance. Most German units in the area had already withdrawn across the Rhine or surrendered. The fighting inside Colmar was brief. The city, heavily damaged by artillery, contained isolated pockets of snipers and machine gun crews. Company B cleared several buildings near the northern sector. Engagement distances were close, often under 20 meters. Gunfire echoed through the narrow streets and movement was restricted by rubble. Murphy supervised the clearing actions, but avoided extended physical exertion due to his leg injury. With the fall of Colmar, the last German-held territory west of the Rhine in that region was eliminated. The Colmar pocket no longer existed. Units of the 3rd Infantry Division rotated into temporary rest positions in nearby towns. Murphy spent the next days recuperating but remained alert. He did not fully relax. Years of frontline service had conditioned him to expect sudden movement orders, nighttime shelling, and the unpredictability of shifting fronts. Even in secured billets, he kept his gear within immediate reach. The regiment's medical officer noted signs of combat fatigue, difficulty sleeping, heightened awareness of noise, and persistent tension. These symptoms were common among frontline veterans, but particularly visible in soldiers who had fought continuously since North Africa or Sicily. Murphy, though not yet aware of the long-term impact, exhibited many of these patterns. The Colmar pocket was a completed operation, but the campaign was not finished. The Rhine River lay ahead, and the division prepared for the next phase, crossing into Germany. In the first week of February 1945, after the fall of Colmar, the 3rd Infantry Division regrouped in small villages scattered around the region. Company B occupied a cluster of stone houses positioned along a secondary road, used to move supplies between battalion headquarters and frontline units. These structures, though damaged, offered shelter from the snow and wind. Fires were kept low to avoid drawing artillery attention, and blackout procedures remained in effect at night. Murphy spent most of this period supervising training, resupply, and integration of replacements. Many of these new soldiers had limited combat experience. Their arrival temporarily strengthened the company's numbers but required immediate orientation. Murphy demonstrated defensive positioning along walls, proper movement through rubble, and the use of short rushes, 10 to 15 meters at a time, to avoid becoming stationary targets. His instructions were direct and precise, shaped by months of frontline engagements. The regiment continued to probe German positions east of Colmar. Enemy rearguards operated from prepared sites across fields and along wooded ridges. Snipers, machine gun teams, and mortar crews sought to delay the American advance toward the Rhine River. One such position, located on a slight rise overlooking a frozen orchard, opened fire on Company B at a range of 300 meters. The initial burst forced the leading squad to take cover behind a shallow embankment. Murphy analyzed the field and identified the likely location of the gun, a darkened gap in a line of trees where branches had been cleared to create a firing lane. He ordered a flanking element to advance toward a barn situated 180 meters to the right, while 2 riflemen provided suppressive fire. As the flankers closed the distance to within 70 meters, they used grenades and bar fire to eliminate the machine gun crew. The action took less than 10 minutes. No American casualties occurred. The advance toward the Rhine exposed the regiment to additional indirect fire. German mortar teams withdrew steadily but continued to fire at predictable choke points: narrow roads, open fields, and river approaches. During one movement along a partially flooded road, Murphy's platoon came under mortar attack. The first round landed 25 meters behind the column. The second detonated 15 meters to Murphy's left, scattering fragments across the snowy surface. One soldier was struck in the chest by shrapnel and killed instantly. Murphy directed the men into a drainage ditch that paralleled the road. The ditch provided minimal cover but reduced exposure to the next two impacts. Throughout February, Company B rotated between forward patrols and short rest intervals. Murphy's leg injury persisted. Swelling increased after long marches, and medics reapplied dressings every few days. Despite the limitations, he refused reassignment or evacuation. His presence remained central to company stability, especially as casualties from the Colmar engagement had removed several experienced NCOs. German resistance fluctuated in strength. Some villages surrendered without fighting, others contained fortified houses or church towers converted into firing points. In one such encounter, a German sniper positioned in a bell tower began firing at advancing American troops from a height of approximately 25 meters. The distance to the tower base was 140 meters. After several near misses, a mortar team from Company B fired 2 rounds. The first struck the roof. The second hit the upper structure directly. The sniper fell with the collapse of the platform. By late February, the regiment reached the western floodplain of the Rhine. Observers reported limited German movement across the river. Bridges had been destroyed, and remaining ferry points were under heavy German control or artillery coverage. The 3rd Infantry Division established observation posts at intervals along the riverbank, each manned by small detachments equipped with binoculars, radios, and rifles. Company B was assigned to hold a sector near a broken embankment overlooking a narrow bend of the river. The distance to the opposite bank was approximately 280 meters. German forces occupied several structures on the far side, including warehouse buildings and defensive bunkers. At night, the Americans observed lanterns and intermittent vehicle movement, indicating ongoing preparations for resistance. Murphy inspected the observation posts personally. The river's surface reflected the winter moonlight, creating the illusion of open space and depth. Occasional rifle fire came from the far bank at ranges too long for accuracy, but sufficient to remind the Americans that the German defense remained organized. Engineers began assembling bridging equipment behind the lines in preparation for future operations. During one inspection, Murphy encountered a burst of enemy machine gun fire originating from the opposite shore. The rounds struck the water at an angle, sending plumes upward. The range, calculated from trajectory and sound delay, was around 400 meters. None of the rounds came close, but the exchange signaled that German gunners were adjusting firing positions to cover potential crossing sites. Morale improved as the regiment continued to advance. News spread that Allied forces to the north and south were pushing rapidly across Germany. Yet winter conditions and scattered pockets of German resistance still demanded caution. Small firefights occurred near farmhouses used as temporary shelters by retreating soldiers. Distances were short, often 20 to 50 meters, and resolved quickly as the German forces withdrew or surrendered. Murphy maintained strict discipline during these operations. He enforced spacing during movement, correct use of cover, and rapid response to artillery. His instructions reflected lessons from earlier campaigns: never remain in open ground longer than necessary, stay below the skyline, and identify potential firing points before crossing open space. As March approached, higher headquarters transmitted orders indicating that the division would cross the Rhine. The crossing date remained classified, but preparations intensified. Ammunition stockpiles were increased, engineers tested pontoon sections, artillery units registered advance fire missions. Murphy's staff reorganized squads to ensure that each contained at least one bar gunner, one grenadier, and multiple riflemen equipped for close-quarters combat on the far shore. Company B was scheduled to cross in the second wave. Casualty projections were high as the operation required advancing into a defended position with limited initial cover. Murphy briefed his platoons on expected enemy reactions: flares, concentrated machine gun fire, mortar bombardment, and attempts to split American units before they could consolidate. Despite the risks, Murphy remained composed. Years of frontline exposure had conditioned him to continuous threat environments. His leadership in these preparatory days reflected the same precision and calm that had characterized his actions at Golzvir. The regiment now stood at the final barrier into Germany. Once the river was crossed, the road to the interior lay open. In the early hours of March 26, 1945, the 3rd Infantry Division received confirmation. The Rhine crossing would begin before sunrise. Company B assembled behind a reinforced embankment approximately 900 meters from the river. Engineers had prepared assault boats, canvas-bottomed craft with metal frames organized in rows along the staging area. Each boat could carry a small squad under low silhouette, minimizing exposure during the crossing. Murphy briefed his platoon leaders. The crossing plan called for rapid embarkation, synchronized paddling, and immediate dispersal on the far bank. German defensive positions were expected to fire illumination flares. Machine gun nests were positioned behind earthen berms and in partially ruined structures. Intelligence estimated the first 30 minutes of the crossing would be the most dangerous, as the Americans would be visible on the water with no available cover. At 04:20 hours, the division opened the operation with a pre-registered artillery bombardment. Hundreds of rounds fell along the German-held riverbank, detonating in waves. The illumination from the impacts reflected across the surface of the Rhine. The bombardment targeted suspected firing points at ranges between 200 and 500 meters inland. Company B moved to the water's edge. Murphy boarded an assault boat with 7 other soldiers. Their oars dipped into the river without sound except for the faint splash muffled by the steady artillery fire. Smoke drifted across the water, providing partial concealment. The river current pushed downstream with noticeable force, requiring constant correction to maintain course. Halfway across, approximately 130 meters from shore, German forces responded. A flare burst overhead, turning the river white. Seconds later, machine gun fire tore across the surface. The first burst passed high. The second struck the rear of a neighboring boat, destroying 2 oars and wounding a soldier in the shoulder. Murphy shouted corrections, directing boats to angle left and spread out. His own craft reached the far bank with only 1 bullet hole through the bow. Upon landing, Company B scrambled across the narrow strip of mud along the river's edge. Murphy led his platoon up a shallow incline toward a line of trees that offered minimal cover. German rifle fire came from the right at a range of 120 to 150 meters. The Americans returned fire while advancing in short rushes. Once they reached the trees, they reorganized and pushed deeper toward the first objective, a low rise overlooking a paved road. The rise was held by a small German detachment armed with an MG-42 and several rifles. Their field of fire spanned the approach route, forcing the Americans to close the distance using depressions in the terrain. Murphy moved with the lead squad, using brief sprints to gain ground. At 50 meters, he signaled the bar team to suppress the machine gun nest. 2 grenadiers advanced to 25 meters, throwing fragmentation grenades into the position. The blast silenced the gun, and the squad secured the rise. With the foothold established, the remainder of the battalion crossed the river and expanded the bridgehead. Engineers constructed pontoon sections behind the infantry, creating a functional crossing for vehicles. German resistance weakened throughout the morning. Several defenders surrendered when their positions were outflanked or isolated. By midday, American forces controlled a sector extending 1.5 kilometers from the river. Company B held the center-right portion of the perimeter. Murphy directed soldiers to dig shallow foxholes and establish overlapping fields of fire. Enemy mortar shells landed intermittently, but accuracy was poor due to sustained American counter-battery fire. A single round detonated 12 meters from Murphy's position, throwing dirt and debris across his helmet but causing no injury. Over the next 2 days, the 3rd Infantry Division advanced rapidly eastward. German defenses fragmented into isolated strongpoints. Company B cleared several villages in succession. Distances between engagements varied. Some firefights began at 200 meters, while others occurred inside narrow corridors where visibility dropped below 10 meters. Murphy's experience in close-quarters fighting served the company well during these house-to-house operations. In one engagement, a German soldier armed with a Panzerfaust fired at an American half-track from a distance of 40 meters. The projectile struck the vehicle's front armor and detonated, killing the driver and wounding 2 passengers. Murphy directed a flanking maneuver to neutralize the firing position. The dismounted fire team closed to 18 meters, eliminating the attacker with rifle fire. By April, the division reached the Danube River. German resistance, while diminished, remained unpredictable. Company B crossed the Danube on temporary footbridges, assembled by engineers. Artillery fire continued to fall sporadically near crossing points. Murphy noted that each advance came with reduced resistance, but still carried risks of isolated ambushes, mines, and unexpected enemy pockets. As the division pushed into Austria, German command structures collapsed. Surrenders increased. Company B processed dozens of prisoners daily, escorting them to holding areas guarded by rear elements. Murphy oversaw these procedures when necessary, though his primary focus remained tactical coordination. On May 7th, official word reached the regiment. Germany had surrendered. Shooting ceased along the front. The next morning, Murphy stood with Company B on a hillside overlooking a valley where smoke from burning German vehicles drifted upward. The silence felt unfamiliar after years of sustained operations. Muscle memory still kept him alert for incoming fire. With the war's end, Company B transitioned into occupation duties. Murphy coordinated the establishment of road checkpoints, supervised weapons collection from surrendered units, and inspected buildings for stored munitions. One assignment placed him in charge of processing more than 200 prisoners in a single day. Many were exhausted conscripts, though some belonged to veteran units that had resisted until the final weeks. Administrative actions followed. Murphy received his formal promotion to first lieutenant, reflecting his leadership during the war's closing months. His awards were confirmed in sequence. Officers documented his conduct during patrol actions in France, defensive operations in the Colmar sector, and the decisive stand at Golzvir. The Medal of Honor ceremony was scheduled stateside. In June 1945, Murphy was ordered back to the United States. He boarded a transport aircraft departing from an airfield in Austria. The flight crew noted his resting posture, upright, alert, even when attempting to sleep. Years of artillery blasts and night engagements had conditioned him to remain partially awake in any environment. His leg injury, aggravated by cold and strain, stiffened during long flights, but he did not request medical assistance. Upon arrival in Texas, Murphy underwent extended medical evaluation. Doctors documented blast exposure, shrapnel wounds, hearing loss, and chronic fatigue. Although cleared for limited activity, he displayed visible signs of stress accumulated from nearly 2 years of continuous combat. Interviews conducted during this period described him as thin, quiet, and physically depleted. Murphy attempted to reintegrate into civilian life, but the adjustment was immediate and difficult. Crowded rooms triggered hypervigilance. Sudden noises produced reflexive defensive reactions. Sleep remained irregular. He avoided large public events except when duty required his appearance. His Medal of Honor ceremony took place in late June. The citation recounted his actions on the burning M10 tank destroyer, emphasizing the distances involved. German infantry advancing to 50 meters, artillery detonations within 10 to 20 meters, and armored vehicles firing at short range. The medal was presented with full honors, but Murphy's response remained restrained. After the ceremony, he attempted various occupations: ranch work, small commercial ventures, and public speaking. None provided stable direction. His combat record, widely publicized, attracted attention from filmmakers and publishers. This attention would shape the next phase of his life. In 1955, Murphy portrayed himself in the film adaptation. Production teams reconstructed key engagements, including Golzvir. Though staged on controlled sets, the recreated battlefields reflected the terrain conditions he once fought in. Crew members noted his discomfort during scenes involving simulated artillery fire. The blast triggered involuntary flinches, and he requested minimal noise during filming breaks. Murphy spoke publicly about his condition, becoming one of the earliest American veterans to address combat trauma without anonymity. His statements attracted national attention. He urged the government to expand support for veterans suffering from invisible wounds, arguing that psychological injuries required the same recognition as physical ones. His influence contributed to slow but steady changes in how the United States approached veteran rehabilitation. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Murphy acted in over 40 films, most involving frontier or military themes. These roles provided steady income but did not resolve financial pressures. A combination of failed business ventures and unstable investments placed him in debt. Despite these setbacks, he refused offers to endorse cigarettes or alcohol, maintaining a strict code aligned with his wartime discipline. In 1971, Murphy boarded a private aircraft traveling from Atlanta to Martinsville, Virginia, for a business meeting. Poor weather conditions, combined with reduced visibility and mountainous terrain, caused the plane to crash near Brush Mountain. Murphy and 5 others were killed instantly. Investigators concluded that the pilot became disoriented in low cloud cover. Mechanical failure was ruled out. Murphy was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His headstone followed the standard design used for enlisted personnel and officers. Simple, white, unembellished. Despite the understated marker, his gravesite became one of the cemetery's most visited locations. Veterans of multiple wars left unit patches, medals, and handwritten notes along the stone. Murphy's influence extended beyond military doctrine. His public discussion of combat trauma helped reshape national conversations about mental health. His life demonstrated both the capability of a single soldier to alter the course of a battle and the long-term cost borne by those who carried the burden of prolonged combat. His story remained a complete record, a young Texan farm boy turned infantry officer, a soldier who fought across Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany, a leader who held a burning tank destroyer against impossible odds, a veteran who struggled with invisible injuries, and a national figure whose legacy persists through military study, film history, and the ongoing recognition of the challenges faced by returning soldiers. Audie Murphy's war ended in 1945. Its effects lasted the rest of his life and shaped the country long after his death. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, please do us a favor and click like. Every like encourages YouTube to show this story to more people. Click subscribe and turn on notifications. We will rescue forgotten stories from dusty archives. Stories about shooters who proved their skill and courage. Real people, real heroism. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community spans the globe. You are not just a viewer, you are participating in preserving these memories. Tell us if anyone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping Audie Murphy not fade into silence. These people deserve to be remembered, and you are helping to make that happen.